on today's episode, we're going to talk you through how at one time we tried to put the cart before the horse. And we had a mentor that said, we got to fix things on the home front before we can grow this business. So we're going to talk about how to not keep score in your relationships.
All right, HP, we are back.
Holla, holla.
Another episode of the Freedom Parents.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, today our topic is...
I like that shirt.
Thank you. That's our topic.
I like that.
You liking my shirt?
No.
No. Our topic is stop keeping score.
Stop keeping score.
What's that mean?
In your marriage.
In your marriage.
In your relationships.
With your boy and your girl.
Oh, gangster. Contra gangster. My gosh.
You gotta have fun, you know?
Yeah.
So, woo! This is something we struggled with, right? We were on the struggle bus. What? Excuse of me.
No, we did. We did for sure. We were spinning our wheels for quite some time. Mm-hmm. Quite some time. Tit for tat.
Yeah. I constantly kept score of what I thought you weren't doing at home. I think you kept score of a little bit of both of what I wasn't doing at home and or the business.
Yeah. We certainly weren't rowing in the same direction. Therefore, we weren't really getting anywhere as fast.
Yeah.
We weren't a good example. Luckily, we only had one kid at the time. So we only screwed up one. We didn't screw up the other three.
She's doing okay.
She was too young to even notice. But yeah, that was part of the motivation too. Was who's watching.
Yeah.
You know? Our kids are watching. That's who.
Yeah, well, ultimately we talk to a lot of couples. Not all, but we mentor a lot of married people. And some of the things that we find ourselves having to guide couples through how to interact with, and we're not marriage therapists. We are not qualified.
No part of that.
However, just experience, we just share our own experiences and we can just call out BS when we see
Got
it.
my challenges with you. I mean,
what? Excuse me? What?
Did it come out right?
Do we need a therapist?
No. I just want to make a funny.
Oh, he's so funny.
At your expense.
What was that saying? At my expense. Thank you. Yeah, I'm used to it.
See, there was a day though. Boy, that probably would have been a fight. We took ourselves too serious.
Yeah.
Case in point, right?
Yeah. Well, and honestly too, what happens, why are couples on edge with each other a lot? Typically is because they're taking jabs at each other a lot.
Well, again, yeah, and they don't feel valued. So it's one thing to be like that little thing I just did. That's one thing when the person knows that you value them and you hold them at a higher level of respect because they know it's you know what I'm saying? There's not a thought that crosses their mind. But there was a time when they would do stuff like that and we weren't on that level and it wasn't funny.
Yeah. Right.
And it could have been a jab, might have not been a jab, didn't matter. It's how they took it was a jab. And never ended well.
It's the problem of people fighting with their spouse instead of for their spouse constantly.
Yeah, that's good.
And there's just, oh my God, this topic could go in so many directions. But one of the things
Rein it in.
That we hear and see a lot, like we saw in ourselves when we had a collective goal that was far bigger than any of our problems. And that's what we work with a lot of couples today, that they have this collective goal that's far bigger than any of their problems, yet they're still holding on to their problems. And it's not helping them move forward into working together, fighting for each other in their business, in making their health and business goals become a reality. There can be a lot of enabling. There can be a lot of just old hurts that constantly come up. And, when it comes to the keeping score thing, especially if you have kids and stuff, we're talking about like this can be an exhaustive list of reasons why you can't work together. And if you can't work together because you keep stacking up all the reasons that your partner's not measuring up,
yeah,
good luck on building a business.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, think about it. When we first came into our first mentorship, think back before we were doing the business we're doing now, when we were gym owners. We straight up were seeking, and when we sought out someone, flew all the way to California looking for answers, and we end up finding mentorship, hired our first coach, and we were seeking him to help us fix our business. And I tell you what, God works in his own way, because divinely he connected us with a coach who was faith-based and actually helped us get further along in that back in the day. And he said, man, I can't help you with your business. Do I help you with your marriage? Mm-hmm. And I just can't help but think if we'd have got with some of these bozos these days that are just high sales and high this, not saying you can't learn a few things from them, eat the fish, spit out the bones, but man, it could have been catastrophic if we'd have hired one of those people, because it'd have been bad timing.
Yeah.
Because of, you think about a divided house, man, how are you going to build upon that when the foundations is broke? So a lot of these people that we mentor, I'm like, we're not marriage counselors. Y'all need to get some stuff fixed on the home front, because this is going to be a continuation of the same shit.
Same stuff. It falls into one of those categories about the self-awareness, about the excuses we make for ourselves too. Like it's this revolving door, this broken record. And like, really, do you really want to, outside of business, achieving goals in business, ask yourself first, do you truly love the person you're with? And do you still see yourself spending the rest of your life with that person? Do you really want to spend the rest of your life arguing about these same things that you argue about, or and maybe you don't even say anything, but it's bitterness and a chip on your shoulder that when your husband or wife turns to you, you turn away, because in your head, you're thinking about all the things they didn't do or all the things they didn't do right. Is that really how you want to spend the rest of your marriage, the rest of your life? So that was a defining question for me, because I realized like little things that I kept score of in our relationship. And look, guys, I'm not saying I'm perfect. And I'm not even saying that like once you identify that not taking the garbage out really bothers you, I'm not saying it's not going to ever bother you again. But what we need to do is try our best to always look through it through the lens of love, the lens of acceptance and patience, and also letting go of control. Like we're trying to control people basically when we're keeping score. We're trying to make things 50-50. A relationship is not that way. But when we are keeping score, back to my main point, if you have decided like, this is the person I love, this is the person I can't not live without this person. Like it got to a point where all the little things that I personally was keeping score of, I realized they seem little. And like, for me, that's why I was fighting for them in my head. Like, these are little things. Why would you put a fork in a dirty dishpan with dirty water and I have to grab it now and put it, but those were legit things that bothered me. And again, they still kind of bother me, but I worked myself through it mentally. I'm not going to cause a fight over it. Hopefully I won't. I slip sometimes, but
no, we hire people and
like,
don't have to deal with it.
Ask yourself, is that the reason why you want to have a divorce one day, potentially? And I did. I asked myself that. And I was like, that is dumb. Like, I don't want to see our relationship breaking down over time because of bitterness and resentment and keeping score over little things. That little things turn to big things over time. I see couples, so I know of couples all the time that they don't even know why they don't like each other anymore.
Yeah.
Like they can't even, it's just all over time. It's just like they grew apart because of little and big things or whatever, and never resolving it. But as much as you can sit there and want your spouse to change all day long, but until you change.
Yeah, it's not, that's a good point.
They're not going to change.
Well, one, they're not mind readers. They just think you're being a butthole or a witch. You know what I'm saying?
Nagging.
And, so I think, like you said, clear is kind. It's, if you respect the person enough to marry them and have kids with them, then you should respect them enough to have a conversation with them and let them know what's going on in your head and why you're annoyed. And then maybe at the end of the day, like you said, you decided to not be annoyed at some trivial, stupid thing, regardless of what you thought. So there's two things. Well, there's a couple of things actually, but I actually was sharing this with Sabella, with our oldest, about probably all, but I'll say most, just to play it safe. Arguments could be avoided and quality of life could be enhanced if we all gave up the need to be right. So you could think, for instance, that a dirty fork in a coffee cup full of dirty water is gross, disgusting, dumb, whatever. And maybe you're right. But seriously, to give up that need to be right over a dirty fork and some dirty water in the grander scheme
Start a whole argument
of life and marriage and kids and growing a legacy, when you frame it up that way, and I think that's what you did at some point, it's pretty dumb. It's pretty trivial. So I think giving up the need to be right, great book. I think Today I Begin a New Life. Actually, I think he talks about that, the author. Just look up Today I Begin a New Life. And he talks a lot about that. The other thing is, to your point, was, and this could solve a lot of the world's problems, actually. Sit back. He's talking about solving the world's problems, is if we all took responsibility for personal excellence. So like you said, if you go to work on yourself. So imagine about keeping score. So imagine, and I want you to try this actually. So imagine if you held your peace. You gave up the need to be right, regardless if you were or weren't. It really doesn't matter in the grander scheme of things, right? And you stopped keeping score and you just started operating at a level of excellence personally, while stop keeping score. And you start to compound day and another day and another day of striving for personal excellence without keeping score. Holding your peace, giving up the need to be right, and 4 days turns into 8, and 8 days turns into 12, 15. That spouse, now you created the monster. So first I want to say this, lean in on this one. You created the monster. Listen, lean in. This is the biggest thing that always made me revolt or go back to the old way of thinking or doing, was I had conditioned you, for instance, to react and be a certain way by the way I was acting and keeping score. So I thought, I'm going to try this not keeping score, achieving personal excellence and focusing just on me, day one. But then you were being a little bit of a witchy witch. Well, I conditioned that witchy witch. So then day two, I was like, oh man, she's still being a little bit of a witchy witch. And I'm sitting here striving to be personal, for excellence. And then I would just go back and say, screw it, this doesn't work. Because I was keeping score. You see, it's going to go back to keeping score. So then eventually I got smart and wise and I said, you know what? I take responsibility for her reacting because I was being a punk a lot of times. So she's just reacting and conditioned to an old me. I got to show her a new me, and it's going to take time and just time, right? So you have to be aware of that. And it may take 7 days. It may take 21 days. It may take 3 months because maybe you were a big fat asshole, right? It's possible. But if you continue to not keep score, give up the need to be right, and pursue personal excellence, I'm telling you, things will change.
Oh, that's so good. Actually, you verbalized with that to me. These are all very, very real things and processes that we have gone through as a couple, as an entrepreneurs and couplepreneurs. And I believe it was in our kitchen. A lot of good conversations happened in our kitchen. But I can't remember what it was, but I remember I had a routine response, a conditioned response. And I remember you like looking me in the eyes and being like, I'm sorry. I conditioned that response in you. And I remember you hugging me, and that was the only, like, it was the first time I experienced you taking responsibility for the way you were, I don't want to say making me feel, because you choose to feel however you want to feel, right? However, I wasn't aware to realize I could choose how I wanted to feel. So therefore you were making me feel, right? You took responsibility for that. And I remember just feeling like a wall was just tumbling down around me. Like you have permission to not be defensive because this person is trying to love you the best they can, being a human. And it made me want to do the same, to the effect of, this is a next step in to stop keeping score. Notice the things that bother your freaking spouse. Like, notice it.
Yeah. Don't
Okay.
scriptures talk about that? Don't
Like,
go poking around with that stuff.
It may seem minuscule to you, like, but to them, it's not.
Yeah.
So take interest into why that irritates them and see what happens, to your point. Like, when you, for me, start picking up your shoes, it took effort. Like, it was something that bothered you. I'd leave shoes all over the place. Not saying I'm perfect at it now, but I notice it. And I still, to this day, like, so one of the first things I want to do, because my feet, I just want to get in the house and take my shoes off right away, wherever I'm at. But
Wherever she's at.
I put my shoes away, not because it makes me feel better. I put it away now because I looked at it, I'm like, for some reason, this is important to him. Okay. I mean, it's not a big deal for me to grab my shoes and put them away, really. So I'll try that, I'm weird in that I'm organized, but not necessarily tidy.
Yeah.
So this is an area that I've grown in, but still there's just some things that I know you don't like, that my clothes, our kids' laundry is always done, but mine's not. I do my laundry. So it's
I just laugh at it now, though.
It used to drive you mad.
And then when it starts to take over my side, I just push it all back over there like a bulldozer.
And you know what? I'm like, yeah, touche.
Honestly, back in the day, I'd get so angry and I'd probably kick the stuff over there. Now I'm just like, push it over.
It's growth. And you decided that wasn't important enough, to cause tension in our marriage, and so I love that. But one of our friends, Candy Silvestri, we were having a conversation around this topic recently, and she said something in just such a really great way, and I really loved it. She said, she thought about it through the lens of like her spouse. Like, she might be having all these conversations in her head of like, I'm packing the lunch and I'm making the breakfast and I have to do this for the kids and da-da-da-da. And it's all this conversation in her head, but it's showing on the external of like tension and frustration. And she said, but through my husband's eyes, I look like a freaking boss. Like, I look like I'm doing it because I want to do it and because I'm good at doing it. And I never ask for help. So he just thinks it all comes so easy to me. She said, like, it's my responsibility to let him know I'm drowning.
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
yeah, exactly.
Dang. It is your responsibility to let your spouse know that you're drowning. Your spouse doesn't want you to drown.
No, 100%. And what you'll find is when you start taking that personal responsibility for your own excellence without keeping score, you realize that you begin to row the boat in the same direction. But you also realize, like for us, like because we don't keep score anymore, there's just things that you have come into taking responsibility of. And there's things that I'm running with and I'm taking responsibility of. Mm-hmm. And sometimes my task might be 10 times more than yours for that month. Mm-hmm. Whereas another month comes along and you're just hitting along harder than mine, right? And what my responsibilities are, so to speak. Not that they don't intertwine, but there's some things I own and some things you own, right? Not that we aren't interchangeable, we can't step in, but we own them. And the thing is to hold on and say, hey, that's me. That's my space. That's mine. I got this.
Yeah.
And I think I wasn't going to go there, but the thing that really helped me realize that, there's a lot of pivotal moments. We talk about the power pivot all the time. Was I think it's Stephen Covey. I'm embarrassed now, I forget, but I'm 99.99%. He talks about stimulus and response. And stimulus response, there's a gap. And I think if that was one of the first times I was introduced to the concept of what we've been talking about, I just framed it up differently as we've evolved and personal developed. But the gap is where all happiness can be created or all the demise and pain can happen. Because you have stimulus, an action, a word, a voice, something said, a comment, and then you have the response that's usually going to be negative because it's reactive. But there's a gap between that stimulus and that response. So the gap is where you give up, you pause, you give up the need to be right. You don't give it any attention. And what he said is, and this was the most powerful thing he said, and I think that's what made me really start to study that subject, was don't give your power away to other people's sins. And for me, see, that's my language, because I don't want to be powerless. So you got to think what makes you click, what makes you tick. And I was like, that's true. I'm allowing this person's pain, this person's insecurity, this person's whatever it may be, cause me to react and be someone I don't want to be. So I'm powerless to them. I was giving my power away to their sins. So that gap, and believe it or not, when you first start, and that's what I was talking about earlier in a roundabout way, is that gap is when you breathe, you don't respond. You take a drink of water, don't respond. You got to give it space. Mm-hmm. And that gap seems very, very short when you're first going through this and introducing this concept. But eventually, it starts to feel like the Matrix. And that 1 second pause, that 3 second breath, drink of water, now it feels like time has stopped. And you're actually just kind of processing through it. Oh, I shouldn't get mad at that. I conditioned that. That's why they're reacting that way. Or maybe I had nothing to do with it and they're just kicking the dog. But why do I respond back to it and give my power away to their sin of kicking the dog because they had a bad day? And it starts to slow down, and you can see all this as you practice this. But at first it's going to feel really, that gap is really, really short. But eventually, if you practice it, it will begin to expand and slow things down to where then you can react consciously and not unconsciously. And I don't want to get all deep into that stuff, but
no, I think that is so great. And I know that is 100% accurate, because I can have that same experience when we're having conversations with each other, but also too, trying to work on bringing this into my relationship with our teenage daughter, you know, and understanding, first of all, guys, your teenage kids, like, get this book. Your teenager is not crazy, or your teenager isn't crazy. Understanding the science behind what's going on in their brain will help you so much as a parent. But when there's tension around a topic or something, and she's feeling emotional or intense about something, and or wanting an outcome I know I can't give her, this has been work, but it really has helped me so much too. So now this is a skill that you're going to be able to move over into so many relationships. But it's like, for instance, this morning there was some tension, and I just kept reminding myself to take deep breaths, to witness the situation of what's going on versus just reacting, to communicate too, even just little things like telling her that I was working on managing my mindset and my positivity, and we weren't able to have that conversation with this kind of tension right now. You know, it just, and even said something a little hurtful to me. And you know what? I was so proud of myself, because I was like, you know, that was hurtful, but I see you're upset, and I'm going to choose to not be hurt by that.
Don't give your power away to other people's sins.
And you know, it wasn't but probably less than a minute or two later, she comes back around the corner and gives me a hug. Yep. And you know what?
Space.
Yeah, because we start attacking the people we love and not noticing that they're in an emotional moment. They're human too. And then we feel threatened, or we feel, you know, hurt or whatever, instead of just noticing, I'm like, oh, wow, he looks really stressed right now, or she looks really tired. Like, okay, so let me just notice what's kind of going on right now and be the steady right now.
You slow things down. You begin to look through the lens of the Matrix.
The Matrix.
You know what? The dealers, you haven't watched the Matrix. It's like all of a sudden the bullet starts slowing down. They're still flying as fast as the bullet, but when he got to the point to where he was in that space, he's like watching the bullets go by. And that's how this gets. Like, literally, if you practice this, what we're speaking of, you're going to watch the bullets or the negative comments, insults flying at you, and you're just watching them go by, and you're like, well, why are they shooting these at me right now? And you start walking through it, and you give it space.
And let me list another reason to do this. Because if indeed your spouse or person that you love is in the wrong, you adding tension, insult, injury to the situation, they're never going to see it. They're going to, maybe they see a little bit, but they're also, you've added to and confused the whole equation by adding your insult, your tension, your aggression, or whatever. And now their brain is like, yeah, but then she did this, and that was really mean and terrible. Mm-hmm. They can't filter through what they need to change and or let go of. In order to get better, you know? Yeah. So you might be right, but also if without your silence and also calm steadiness, they'll never see it.
Never, ever.
Well, and this is kind of like final piece talking about, you know, spouses that are couplepreneurs and wanting to build a life and business together. You're never going to empower your spouse to rise into their full potential and to want to build this thing with you if you are putting tons of pressure on them that they never measure up.
Yeah. If you walk away from anything, I think there's a lot of pearls in there personally. And I say that because I know that where we were and where we are today, which isn't perfect, but it's a lot further. We're rowing in the same direction. I'll tell you that right now. But I think it's to don't keep score, but you got to do it for a long time. Because you got to give people space to see that you changed.
Yeah.
And operate from a place of excellence. And over time, see what happens. See what changes. Yeah.
Yeah. Keep a gratitude list.
Yep.
And instead of keeping score, keep a gratitude list of everything that your partner does do right and that you love about them. And that will start filling the void and removing the bitterness and resentment with joy and love.
100%.
All right, friends. Hope you enjoyed this episode. We'd love to hear your comments and feedback or share your stories with us on YouTube or in the comments on Instagram. We love talking to you. And remember, we're here because we believe that you deserve to build the life that you desire. So go out and create your new American dream.